Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're looking at a guy whose face is literally carved into mountains and stamped on our coins, right? When we think of Abraham Lincoln, we immediately picture this legendary icon, the towering, unshakable savior of a nation. But, that marble monument kind of hides a much deeper, much more complex reality. So today, we're going to pull back the curtain on the actual man and examine a journey defined not by easy victories, but by grueling, repeated struggles. So, what if America's greatest president was also its biggest failure? It sounds like a total contradiction, doesn't it? We have this myth in our heads of Lincoln's inevitable, destined success. We just assume he was always on a straight, upward trajectory right to the White House. But to truly understand his greatness, we've got to completely shatter that myth. In this explainer, we're going to trace his path through a series of devastating defeats that honestly would have broken almost anyone else. Okay, let's dive into this. Part 1, the myth of instant success, from poverty to power. Just think about his origins for a second. We're talking about deeply impoverished beginnings, a harsh frontier life marked by intense physical labor, dirt floors, and literally less than 12 months of formal schooling. To go from that all the way to his legendary status as the 16th president of the United States, that is an almost unbelievable leap. The distance between those two realities was not crossed easily. His legendary presidency was quite literally forged in the fires of that early poverty. Part 2, a timeline of crushing defeats. The Valley of Defeat. Now, a crucible is a severe trial or situation where interacting elements forge something entirely new and resilient. Lincoln's life wasn't just hard. It was an active, burning forge. Every single loss, every public humiliation was an element actively forging the unshakable resilience he was going to desperately need later on. And the hits just kept coming. Years earlier, his New Salem store completely fails, leaving him drowning in what he actually jokingly called his national debt. Then, mid-career, he runs for the state legislature and loses. Fast forward to when he's trying to make a major political comeback shortly before the presidency, and he suffers a crushing, highly public loss in the Senate race to his rival Stephen A. Douglas. Just defeat after defeat. For most people, any single one of these would be a career ender. You just pack it up and go home, right? But not Lincoln. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is that out of that exact sequence of crushing failure, the 16th president of the United States is born. He didn't become president in spite of those failures, he became president because of them. That crucible burned away his fragility and left behind a man who simply could not be stopped. Which brings us to part 3, leading through the crucible, the ultimate test. Let's be real, his presidency was absolute chaos. He steps into the Oval Office, and immediately he has to fight a catastrophic civil war to keep the nation from permanently splitting apart. At the exact same time, he's navigating immense political opposition to abolish slavery, fundamentally changing human rights in America. All of this while managing insubordinate generals who were overly cautious, openly disrespectful, or just outright incompetent. Any one of these is a historic crisis, but he dealt with them all at once. And this brilliantly illustrates the core narrative of his life. By enduring those earlier crushing personal and political defeats, he built the exact tools required to apply that uniquely forged resilience to a brutally divided nation. When the Civil War brought constant news of battlefield losses and political betrayal, Lincoln didn't break. Why? Because he already knew exactly how to survive the Valley of Defeat. Part 4, Words that Remade America. The Emancipation and Gettysburg. Through all of that incredible chaos, Lincoln's greatest weapon wasn't just his resilience, it was his voice. The Emancipation Proclamation wasn't just some military tactic, it was a profound moral shift. Lincoln wielded his executive power. Power, remember, he only had because he survived decades of political failure, to redefine the very purpose of the war. It was no longer just about preserving a border. It became a war for human freedom, altering the trajectory of American history forever. 77 years ago. In just a few minutes, standing on a blood-soaked battlefield at Gettysburg, he articulated the nation's struggle with incredible gravity. He gave profound meaning to the massive loss of life, casting the war as the ultimate test of whether any nation conceived in liberty could long endure. Let's move to and see how this builds into Part 5, an immortal legacy, the ultimate sacrifice. Just as the light at the end of the tunnel finally appeared, the story takes a devastating turn. His ultimate success was secured. The Civil War was won, the Union was preserved. But at that exact moment of triumph, he was tragically assassinated. He carried the entire nation through its darkest hour, but he never really got to enjoy the dawn. Which brings us to the core takeaway of our explainer today. Abraham Lincoln is the architect of union for sure, but his is a legacy built entirely on defeat. His immortal historical status is completely inseparable from his capacity to endure failure. He's a legend not because he was perfect, but because he absolutely refused to let failure have the final word. So think about your own life, your own setbacks. How can Lincoln's journey through crushing failure change the way you face your own defeats? If the greatest leader in American history was forged in a crucible of constant rejection and loss, then maybe, just maybe, your own failures aren't the end of your story. Perhaps they are the exact elements needed to forge your greatest successes. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I really hope this changes how you view your own journey.